going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of JaAR. JaAR, for those of you that may be new, stands for Joe
and Amy
Review. This is our weekly show where we review the Magic stories. And as we have been doing recently, and as we will be doing for the foreseeable future, we are reviewing Innistrad Midnight Hunt's stories. We are here this week for the main story, in fact, main story number 2, The Motives of the Wolf by K. Arsenault Rivera. My quick review at the top is I enjoyed this story in that it was, I thought the story was very good. I was being very vague there. It was emotional in places, in the best way. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed it. I don't know what your thoughts were.
I think the story overall was good. I think there were some pretty poignant lines, which I can try to talk about, even though I didn't write down quotes of any of them, because why would I?
Well, because you were so immersed in the story. You didn't take time to be like, ooh, write that down. You just were like, wow. You know, like every time that one of them came up. But hey, because of that, and because you've now heard our quick reviews, I didn't cut you off, did I? That was the end of your quick review. Please feel free, if you have not already read this story, to go do so, and to remove as many barriers as possible. If you want to go read this story in particular, instead of just checking them all out for yourself, the top link in the description down below will take you directly to this story, so that, as I said, you can read it for yourselves. We encourage you to do that, and then of course we would love it if you would come back here and join us in our review and in the discussion in the comments down below.
Yeah, because this is a video about our opinions of the story, but we want to hear yours too.
Correct, as always. And so before we get started, as a reminder, welcome to the Geek for All YouTube channel. Please don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell. It helps us out immensely. It also helps you out a lot because you'll get notifications whenever any of our videos come out, including more JARs over the coming weeks for the rest of these stories, and whenever we go live every Monday and Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on this channel. This past Friday we were not live, but that's because we were at the pre-release. Can I reach one? We were at the pre-release for Innistrad Midnight Hunt, and so we encourage you to check out those videos that we did for the pre-release. We had 2 of them this past weekend. Maybe one of them will be up there for you. We opened some kits, and then we got to go around the pre-release itself, see what all the players were opening, etc. And so, of course, we could not be here to stream. But otherwise, every Monday and Friday we stream. Fridays are video games, assorted video games, and Mondays are MTG Arena. In fact, this past Monday was our first time dipping into Innistrad Midnight Hunt Limited. So we would love it if you would join us for those. As I said, the best way is to subscribe and
ring that bell.
That's right. And so, thank you.
You're supposed to say the ring that bell.
I was expecting you to just do the motion and I would say it, but regardless, ring the bell as well. And we appreciate it. Liking and sharing is also really helpful as well. So, let's get into the review itself. The story itself was told in a manner of the past, the present, the past, the present, the past, the present, past, present, past, present, 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 present. And on your first read-through, on my first read-through, I won't say what it was for you because that's rude, and I just don't know. But for me, for my first read-through, it took me a couple of beats to understand that it truly was, and it did a great job doing it, by the way, past, then present, then past, then present. And every time there was that line of demarcation between one section and the next, it truly was jumping through time, which is very thematically appropriate for the set, first of all. But, and it was a great way to tell the story as well. Mm-hmm. But it was just, until you figured that out, those first couple of sections might have been a little bit confusing. There was like some pronoun game stuff going on where it was all she, he, and so you didn't yet know that they were talking about Arlen and Tovalar. You were supposed to not yet know, but I think something that this did, whether for better or for worse, and I'm honestly not sure which one I feel at this moment, but it did a good job in this regard of making it so that a second read-through would be a lot more beneficial.
Yeah.
And
I feel like I could do this review better if we had read this story a second time.
That's not how we do things
around
around
down
here.
all my poignant lines that I was talking about.
Who needs it? No, but honestly,
I'll just swing it.
As always, if there are poignant lines that you read or that Amy talks about and you know exactly what line she means, again, comments down below.
Yes.
But legitimately, it feels like it necessitates a second read through. And again, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, if you want to, like, there are certain stories where it's like, wow, there's so many subtle things that I think I missed that I want to go back, because now that I know the whole thing, I don't have to focus as much on like, oh my god, what's going to happen, what's next, etc. You have the like regular beats of the story, and so now you want to go in and catch all that subtlety, catch the nuances or the referential statements or whatever that get a lot deeper than the like surface read through that you do on your first time through. I think that there are some times where that makes sense for a story, and there are other times where that feels a little cheap and forced. I think my reaction is that it's not forced this time, because it's a way to tell the story. You're supposed to be a little bit confused in the beginning, and then once you get it, that it's okay, past then present, then past then present, in that type of order, and then you just are gonna, somewhat unfortunately, you're just gonna get to a moment where they stop going to the past, but they kind of don't clue you into the fact that they're gonna stop going to the past, and so those lines now are just passage of time or change of location slightly in the story, but it's all still Arlen going through. So I don't know. At first, I think, because I was confused, I was like, oh god, is this going to be like the kind of thing where it's like, oh god, are we in the past? Are we in the present? Where are we? Am I going to have to like really focus so heavily on this that like I'm going to take myself out of the story over and over again to do that? Because that would have been frustrating as hell for me, in my opinion, right? I hate that. Because I've talked about, it's been a while actually since I talked about this, but ironically we talked to my mother about this weekend.
I mean, I didn't, but
you were with us when we talked about it.
I was in the room.
Yes. But there are certain situations we had a theater teacher who said that he always despised when something would occur on stage, so in this case in the story, that takes you out of the world that your mind is in. So if there's a mistake on stage, or if there's stuff like confusing stuff like this in the story, it removes you from the story, and you're thinking about the story as opposed to the world that's being described to you. You're not
opposed to being immersed in it.
Thank you. Yes. And that frustrates me a bit, because I'd rather just be able to be immersed in the story, please. As opposed to, oh god, where are we? Did we just change time? Did we just change like perspective? Or who's he? Who's she? That stuff being so confusing in the beginning was a little frustrating, but I think that it cleared itself up quickly enough that it didn't take too much away, in my opinion. But I think if it had stretched on further, I would have been more frustrated.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is really annoying. This story wasn't that annoying at that, because of the fact that there basically were only a few characters in this.
Sure.
So, even if while reading the beginning you can't infer who he and she are and whatever else, as you read, you infer it, which is the only reason why they did that, because they wouldn't have done it that way if they didn't think you could accurately infer that.
Right. If there were like multiple he's and she's and then it's like, well, this he referred to Tovalar, but this he referred to Teferi, and this he referred to, you know what I mean? Like, then it's like, no, that's way too much. Absolutely not. No, thank you.
It didn't do that.
Correct. It definitely did not do that. So that's a very good point.
So it's really good writing. It did jump around a lot. I think, like you said, it kind of makes it necessitate a second read.
Yeah.
Which I think is dumb. when it comes to magic stories, because I think it's hard enough to have people read it the first time. So I don't really think that writing it that way, that this is the time and place for that, unfortunately.
Okay.
But I do think it was a good story.
Agreed.
Anyway.
Agreed. Yeah. So, as with anything that we say, if you agree, disagree, whatever, please, in the comments down below, we would love to hear from you. Something that we talked about 2 weeks ago at this point, but when we reviewed main story number 1, something that we talked about a lot, and something that the author, K. Arsenal Rivera, mentioned to us on our Twitter when we tweeted about that video. Something that we keyed in on a lot were the Abyssinian symbols and what they meant or still mean to the people of Innistrad, even now following Avacyn's unmaking. And here in this story, because we're in the past, we're getting to see Arlen and her mother, and to a degree her father, and their interactions with the Abyssinian symbols because of Arlen's connection with the church, which Tovalar brings up, but it's also kind of a nod to the last story that we had with Arlen. Now this one may be a little bit tougher of an ask for future me, but I'm going to try it anyway. There was a prior story that we have already reviewed on this channel in this series of Arlen Cord when she was first introduced in, I believe, Eldritch Moon. Because I think it was like the first story of Eldritch Moon, if my memory serves, and I did not look this up beforehand. But I believe it was like the first story of Eldritch Moon was where we finally heard about Arlen Cord. I'm going to try to link it up there. We'll see if I can do it. If it's not there, I apologize, but it should be. But otherwise, feel free to check out our, Shadows of Innistrad Eldritch Moon story reviews.
There are a lot of them.
There are. And
because they used to do lots of stories.
But go and check that out. But that story, what I remember of that story is, right, Arlen was, I believe, training to be a Cathar. I did not look this up beforehand. Just going off my memory here. It's been many years. Arlen was training to be a Cathar. Her mentor was a little bit strict on her, but that was just his leadership style or whatever. And then when he found out that she was a werewolf, he kind of shunned her and lost respect for her until she then later saves his life. And then it's like, all is forgiven. It's like an after school special. Well, now all is forgiven and I love you again and we can kiss and make up and everything's fine. So that's what I remember from that story. That's what stands out to me from that story. And so it reminds me when we come to this one that yes, Arlen came from a religious family. It was something that was important to her, was being a Cathar. And so that's why we see a lot of these discussion of these Abyssinian symbols from the village that she grew up in, that her father was making them with his own hands. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to just dominate this if you have anything to add. The one other thing with that was there was an amazing moment that, again, very sad, but just so powerful. When Arlen has become a werewolf, has killed, and Tovalar is helping her kind of cope with that, and she's still able to return home as this, when she's back in her human form, and she returns to her mother, who is like this frail old woman, or this frail weak woman who is comes and embraces her and says, oh, we lost more boys or something last night, and Arlen wants to tell her mother, listen, it was me, I didn't want to do it, but I have to now, it's, I'm trying to control it better. And then sees the Abyssinian symbol in the background, which she has already stated, her family has a bunch of them because they're supposed to protect them, and obviously they didn't, or obviously they don't, because Arlen turned into a werewolf. And she when seeing that symbol, decides not to say anything because she wants her mother to be able to keep her faith. And I thought that was really powerful. And I mean, it sucks that she can't confide in her own mother, but I found that to be really like a cool part of the story.
I thought of all of those things in a completely different way.
Okay, please. That's why oddly, it doesn't happen often that we are in disagreement about things, or not like disagreement, but like that we focus on different things. So I'm super looking forward to hearing this. Please.
So you mentioned Tovalar was like trying to help Arlen cope with basically being a killer now, and I see that completely the different way.
Okay.
I see that as she feels like she's stuck with him because she doesn't know how to navigate this on her own. And repeatedly, time and time and time again, he is going against her will. He is not listening to her when she's saying, I don't want to look at blood and guts because then I toss my guts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't want to kill. I don't want to hunt. Like, just leave me alone. And he keeps coming back. So, like I said, poignant lines. Because the perspective that I've had on these stories from day one is that there's that through line of trauma and trauma survival and what that means. So how this story relates to that is that's one of the things, right? Is like Tovalar is this big, imposing, scary fighter, hunter, killer of a person or wolf, however you'd like to look at it, and does not allow for Arlen's consent, basically. He just keeps trying to force her to do things she doesn't want to do. Until she runs away and joins the church or planeswalks away. So, you know, thank God she had those options.
Yeah.
She wasn't honest with her mother, even though, you know, my point to that was that's really important, right? If she actually loves you, she'll listen to you and what you have to say, and you can tell her, like, look, this is how it is. Like, you might think of all werewolves as being this, right? But I am one.
Right.
So I'll tell you what it really is. And if you love me, you'll listen and you'll care and you'll change your mind about your assumptions. And if you don't, then that means that you don't really love me that much. And it's important that Arlen finds that out if that's not the type of person that her mom's gonna be.
Interesting.
So...
Yeah, I really, that moment in particular, everything else that you said, I wholly agree with. That moment of her not telling her mother, I really think, especially because they described like her frailty and etc. in the beginning of that kind of paragraph or whatever you want to call it, that section, combined with looks, sees the symbol, and then chooses not to tell her. It seemed to me like, you know, faith was such an important part of her mother and father's lives that she was like, I want to tell you, but me telling you would mean that that aspect and or all of your faith was a lie. All these symbols that Dad makes to keep us safe didn't do that, and that would like kind of crush her.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so at all. I think it would be, you need to know this information in order to stay safe, right? I'm your daughter. I'm a werewolf now. You need to understand the whole of what that means and figure out a way that you can protect yourself from me. If it's the kind of thing where you're gonna have to. Frailty or not, that means the two of them, when Arlen is not feral, put their heads together and come up with a way to make that protection real. If those symbols aren't doing it, then what will?
Okay.
The two of them doing something about it.
Okay. Interesting. I mean, okay. I don't know.
They can work together. She might be frail and old and full of faith, but she has a mind. Explain it to her. Tell her the reality of it. And then the two of you can work together to figure out a way to make her safe.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
If that means, okay, Arlen, the sun's starting to set, I'm going to tie you up in your room now. And I do that every time, you know?
Well,
and that's what they work out, right?
And that came up as well. Because another very emotional, pretty sad moment in this story was with Luciana, who was a baking buddy of Arlen's, it seems. You know, they would get together and bake things together and kind of had, again, it did such a good job. I want to talk about this later as well, but this story, and I guess story one as well, did such a good job with the Luciana thing, it's just this one, of giving you, like, just the briefest moment of Luciana's existence, and then she dies, or you find out about her death, and it's still pretty sad. Like, it sucks, and it's like, we don't know who this woman is. Like, we've barely heard about her, and yet the little aspect that we did here was so, like, friendly and heartwarming that when the next thing you read is, you know, I locked myself in my room because it was getting to be nighttime and the moon was coming out, and, you know, I don't know why Luciana came and checked on me, but I remember her blood, and it's like,
right.
Wow, that's so sad.
And that's the thing, right? If she told her mom, and her mom knew, then the two of them could work together every night. Or every night that there's going to be a full moon or whatever it is.
Right.
To make sure that that didn't happen. Luciana comes to visit, mom makes sure. Luciana has some tea and then leaves because I don't know where Arlen is, she's not home. You know, or whatever.
Yeah.
Luciana doesn't come to visit, you know, or they move, so Luciana can't find them. You know, whatever idea they come up with, her mom could work with her to get her secured. So it's not just, well, I locked the door, but Luciana still opened it with her credit card or something, I don't know. And then, you know, she wound up dead. Like, that doesn't have to happen. Doesn't have to go that way.
Okay.
If you're just honest.
And then along those lines, this is also kind of what I was getting at. The last story, story number one, so 2 weeks ago, but still, main story number one, we heard about, I wrote their names down, but it's somewhere else in this book, Boulder, Patience, Streak, and Red Tooth. Yes! Thank you for the help as well. Yes, I did it! Anyway, those four... we learned about them last week, and we learned that they were Arlen's pack, and she runs with them, and they each have their own little personalities, right? It was like 1 or 2 sentences, and I made the joke about, like, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or whatever, that, like,
yeah.
you know, there's 4 of the wolves, and there's 4 of the turtles, and You know, it's like, which is which, you know? And then in this story, or actually, I'll give my order of things, because I think yours is different. So
Okay.
I'll give my order of things, and then you let me know. But this past weekend, at the time that we're filming this past weekend was the pre-release. And at one point, right, I had seen the Pax Betrayal card. I did not know it was a story spotlight. I hadn't noticed that aspect of it until at one point this weekend, where I'm looking through my cards to make my deck, and I see Pax Betrayal, and I see the art, and I read the flavor text, and then I see that it's a story spotlight, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm like, her pack just leaves and goes to Tovolar instead? Yep, they sure do.
It's pretty fucked.
And so that, like, not that, you know, it like made me want to cry or anything when I saw the card, but like, that sucks. That's really sad. Even just from the small introduction that we got to these four wolves and how Arlen feels about them in the last main story. And now we have them back in this story where before they betray her or leave her for Tovolar.
They don't betray her.
Right. It's just called Pax Betrayal. That's why I'm saying. But yes.
They need food.
Correct.
They need to hunt. It's their nature.
Right. But pre that moment in this story alone, there wasn't really much mention of them. Right? It was, whatchamacallit, Tovolar walking up to Redtooth and then touching to Redtooth and then walking away, and then it was a line from earlier of Tovolar doesn't have to say anything to imply that Redtooth needs to follow, and then Redtooth just follows. And then Streak, and then Boulder, and then eventually Patience. But Patience is the one that stays by Arlen's side, but basically like is like, please let me go, I need to go, I want to go. And finally Arlen just lets her go. And so that moment also super sad, very emotional, and yet such little setup for it, and yet such big impact in terms of the feelings, right? It happens a lot where in media in general, whether it's short stories, whether it's movies or TV shows, you'll meet a character, they say 3 lines, and then they're dead. And there are times where you'll go, was that supposed to be more impactful than it was? Because
was I supposed to care?
Yeah, I don't care about this person. Like, oops, they're dead now. Oh well, you know. Or there are other times like this where brief introductions, that character is gone now, death, leaving, whatever the case may be, and you're like, wow, that sucked.
Right. Yeah.
And this was
both of those situations suck.
Right. And this was
because in real life, like, there are no people that die that nobody cares that they died.
correct.
You know, there's always somebody who maybe they don't even know that the person passed away, but if they found out, they would care. And so,
Yeah.
like, it sucks when there's a story and they don't make you care about a character before killing them off, because it's not an accurate depiction of life, right? It's because the audience is the only people that exist then, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you just have to imagine that there are other characters in that world somewhere that do care about the fact that that character died.
Right. Yeah. And so...
Sorry.
No,
that was
it's
very tangenty.
No, I mean, hey, what else are we here for? But it really did, like, because the Pax Betrayal card, when I saw, because I scroll through these stories ahead of time to, like, find the picture for the thumbnail, welcome to Inside Baseball, so that, you know, we can work on the thumbnail for the video and save it to our whatever, wherever we're saving it to. And so in scrolling through, I saw that the Pax Betrayal picture was in this story. And I thought to myself, how are we, like, before reading the story, how are we going to get to a point where in this story, I'm going to feel bad that this pack has betrayed Arlen? But it worked. I was happy to be proven wrong. because it was a super sad and sucky moment for Arlen, for the wolves, for the wolf pack, whatever you want to call it. And I really thought, at least in that first paragraph in the beginning of the story with Tovalar, I really thought that the story was attempting to paint Tovalar in a positive light. Because Tovalar seemed to be kind of giving like a mentorship kind of a speech to what turns out to be Arlen shortly after her transformation. And again, maybe this goes counter to what you were talking about before, so maybe that's incorrect from that perspective, but just from reading that first paragraph, I was like, oh wow, okay, so like this person became a werewolf, and maybe that's rough and that sucks, but Tovalar is attempting to explain, hey, this is how it is, right? I've been there, I get it, and this is what you're going to have to deal with now. And that's a good thing. But then it was kind of immediately followed by Arlen's memories. Again, we don't know it's Arlen yet, but Arlen's memories of the people in the town talking about all the terrible things that Tovalar's done in Keswick, right? Breaking into houses, destroying things, killing people, etc. And so she is aware of all of that. And yet, the beginning of that section kind of, at least to me, read as, you know what, he's kind of a good dude. Like a good enough guy that, like, he's taking in this new member of his pack and trying to make her okay with what's happening. Again, that's how I read it at first. Whether it was always, I don't want to be here, you may be saying all these things to me, but I don't care and I don't want it, or whether it was, like at first it was like, oh, thank God somebody's actually helping me and explaining this to me, before she is able to realize like, oh, no, this is not a good guy. You know, like the warnings were relevant and were important to listen to and hear.
They always are.
Right. And so, like, you know, it's just that dichotomy was kind of interesting to me.
Yeah, because to me, it was completely different.
Yeah.
He wasn't like a mentor at all. He was like somebody that she ended up being stuck with because of the situation, but it was a bad situation. And it got worse because she stayed with him. And then when she didn't stay with him, he still came back and tried to continue manipulating her, basically.
Yep.
Forcing her to do things she didn't want to do.
Yeah. And then, kind of at the tail end of this story, we get the I don't want to say eventual, but the inevitable introduction of the Gatewatch into this story in Teferi, Chandra, and Kaya, all at once, really, which it kind of based on the art of these cards or whatever, it kind of felt to me, and especially, I guess, because Teferi's in the set, but Chandra and Kaya aren't, I kind of thought that it would be like a Teferi's there first, and then Chandra and Kaya get called in later or whatever. No, it's all three. Okay. They just all show up at once and try to help or whatever. Interesting. I wonder if that means that Chandra and or Kaya will be in Crimson Vow.
Yeah.
Interesting. Regardless...
Well, they mentioned Geists being a problem, like, at the end.
Well, they mentioned...
And that's, like, Kaya's thing is killing ghosts.
Correct, and that's that one card. Exile target spirit, enchantment, or something else. But it was... No, the mention of Geists was the fact that when it becomes morning, especially after a full moon, they make sure to get the bodies out of the woods, because while werewolves are a problem, they don't want spirits or Geists to also be a problem on top of that, because, you know, people have, the humans have adapted to survive around here, and so they understand how this works. So, yeah. Surprising. And so then, one other thing that I thought was kind of fun is when we meet the Gatewatch here, two moments. One that you and I kind of had a little chat about outside of the story and when we were reading it, was Arlen talking about the tea that Teferi made. Mm-hmm. And she says how the tea was so full-bodied and rich, or I forget, the robust, despite the short amount of time that Teferi steeped it. And I was like, I see you. I get what you did. You can't fool me. So I thought that was cute. Like, again, on Ravnica, and honestly, flavorful. I don't know if this was something that was done on purpose.
She was flavorful too.
Thank you. I don't know if this was something that was purposeful, but on Ravnica, which is where they were at the time that this tea was being served, that's something that was in, I think, Nikki Drayden's stories that she did for Ravnica, for like the regular denizens of Ravnica, for Guilds of Ravnica and Ravnica Allegiance. That's just something that was every day for most people. It was just, oh, I use magic here, and it was like so matter of fact because it was just something that they did to help them along their day, right? Like, I wake up in the morning, I brush my teeth, and I use magic to do this, and then I go about my day. It wasn't anything special, it just happened to be a thing. And so, because they were on Ravnica, I thought it was super flavorful and appropriate that because I felt that way when we were reading those Ravnica stories, that this was just like, you know, Arlen didn't necessarily fully understand it, but to Teferi, he was like, well, whatever, I'll put this tea bag in here, speed up time a little bit, and then, you know, on the teacup, and then go bring her full-bodied, robust tea that has now steeped for however long I decided it was going to steep for, even though for her it was like 5 seconds, right? That's very matter-of-fact use of magic, magic is life kind of a thing, and so I appreciated that. And then the other thing that stood out to me was Chandra. When they first get to, first of all, Chandra being her regular old impulsive self of just like interrupting and saying her full name and like introducing herself. But then the last thing, oh, there's a motorcycle outside. Hooray. And then the last thing was, for me, about Chandra was when they show up to Under the Celestis, and Arlen mentions that she notices Chandra looking up at it in wonder. It's like, of course, she's from Kaladesh, so it's a big machine type of a thing. So that's what I read out of those things as well. So I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know if there was anything more there for you.
No, there was another line that I wanted to specifically mention, but I can't remember it. So.
All right. Hey, if we remember it in between this week and next week, we will we'll bring it up, or the week after, or whatever. And as always, give us your lines too, because then, you know, maybe we'll talk about those.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Fill the comments section with lines.
And then the last thing was, I thought this was a little, when you boil it down, right, it makes perfect sense because it's necessary for the continuation of this story. But the ending of this story was very much like, okay, everybody, here's our mission, and here's what we have to do, and here's what we're searching for. Like, it was done in an interesting way, but when you boil it down for, like, a review, it's just like, the mission was mentioned, the, like, trials and tribulations of, like, what's going to be tough about the mission was mentioned, right? They brought up Thraben, and Chandra's like, but Thraben's a bad place. Not that I'm scared. So, like, there was a little bit of comedy thrown in there, but at the same time, it really was like, oh, we have to go there? But that place is scary. It's like, yes, it's going to be difficult. We get it. Like, okay. So, again, I'm not upset that they did it.
Nicol Bolas. Oh, shit.
Yeah, they look cool fighting him over there, don't they? It's great. But, yeah, it doesn't work out super well for them on that desert planet or plane or whatever you want to call it. But again, that moment was definitely necessary. It's just that for review purposes, it's just, if you want to know what their mission needs to be and how they're going to find this Moonsilver key or whatever, or like where it is or how they know or don't know where it is, the end of this story is the place for you. There's just not really a lot to review about it because it's just like, you know, your mission if you choose to accept it. And it's like a very quick run through of what they have to do, where they're going to go.
There's a manila envelope.
Yeah.
And you open it up,
right.
And it's actually like on paper in black and white exactly what happens.
Yeah, and it's just a, you know, it's like there's an attempt at building tension by reminding you that Thraben is dangerous.
It's scary, guys.
Right. No,
we promise.
Are you sure? Because I feel like, with these last 3 stories after this one, it's just going to be them walking to Thraben, finding the key, bringing it back, activating the Celestis, and everything is hunky-dory. No problems whatsoever. So
sounds cool, bro.
Yeah. So obviously it's going to, and again, the information needed to be passed along, but there's not a lot to review out of that. So, hey, that was the story. Again, overall, I enjoyed it. I didn't, there was nothing offensive about it for me. There was that, like, confusing bit in the beginning, which we discussed, but we got over it pretty quickly.
Yeah. So I remembered what the line was that I wanted to talk about.
Good. Awesome.
And it's the line where Arlen, towards the end, is with all the other planeswalkers and says that, like, how nice it is to be around such a group of people that know that she's a werewolf and aren't afraid of her. And I just thought that was, like, the perfect cherry on top of the, like, PTSD, like, nods.
Sure.
Or, like, little... Because I don't think that was, like, the blatant theme of this,
right,
necessarily.
I don't either. Sure.
I think it was, like, a little bit more just hinted at. But I think that was, like, the perfect little cherry on top of all of those hints. By just being like, yeah, that's a big deal when you have PTSD. Is, like, being able to know that there are people around you who get it and or accept you for it, regardless of how much or how little they know of it.
Right, in spite of it or whatever.
Basically, when you have PTSD, a lot of times you end up kind of being afraid of yourself and your own capabilities, because you realize the kind of things that you're capable of sometimes. And so it's good to have people around you that get it and or, again, just have acceptance for you, sort of above and beyond that fear that most people have of you and or the fear that you have of yourself.
Okay. Sure. All right, good point. Again, any thoughts? That's what the comments are for. Please feel free.
Yep.
Hey, as I mentioned then, next week we will be back with more, although next week we will be back with side story number 2, because that's how we're doing it. We're doing it in the order that they were released. If you missed our first video 2 weeks ago where we described why, you can go check that out and for the understanding of it, but we're going to do it in the order that they were released, and they do main side, main side, main side over and over, so we're going to side story number 2 next week, and then until we're done, that's just how this works. So hey, if you're watching this the day it comes out, Thursday, the day after, Friday, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern, as I mentioned, right here on this channel, we stream. And we will be here streaming the finale, or the ending of our playthrough of Marvel's Avengers War for Wakanda expansion.
Yeah!
And then in the coming weeks, very flavorful for this set, on our Friday streams, not immediately after this week, but soon, as we get into October, it will be spooky month. In the lead up to Halloween.
And there will be werewolves, and there will be vampires, and there will be geists. I don't know. I have no clue what we're playing.
In the game, there will not be, but there will be scariness to be had, so definitely tune in for those. As we mentioned, please don't forget to subscribe and ring that bell. You'll get those notifications. Hey, we also have other channels linked down in the description box below. And so, again, thank you all so very much for joining us. I really hope everybody enjoyed the episode. You're always more than welcome to leave any and all of that feedback down in the comments below, because, I mean, hey, like, yeah, and like we talked about, right? This was a good episode, or this was a good story. And as we get through these, as you're joining us for these, as we are taking the time to read the stories, to review them, to analyze them, and you are joining us in doing so, which we hope is the case, that is a great way for us all to continue to show off our...
Hashtag Vorthos Pride.
That's right. So thank you all for doing that. We really appreciate it. Please feel free, as we mentioned, do all that fun YouTube stuff. Check out the links down in the description box below. You can see our links to our socials as well. You can check us out there. But otherwise, we hope to see you on stream, maybe just back next week for another one of these. Whatever it happens to be, thank you all for being here. And for now, from us here at the Geek for All family of channels, I've been Joe.
And I'm Mimi.
And as we always say, in whichever video of ours you watch next, we will see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.